Hello all, hope you're having a great day today. So today we're talking about communication in the sport industry. This is chapter 14. So sport communication is one of the most prominent and exciting aspects of sport management. Sport media personalities such as James Brown, Al Michaels, Rachel Nichols, and Scott Van Pelt are as recognized as the coaches and athletes they cover. Fans often look with envy at sport public relations professionals who are hard at work and some of the best seats in the house, the press box or press row. Further, technological advances are allowing sport consumers to interact with the organizations and athletes that they support and with one another in myriad of ways. It is a little wonder that so many sport management students are highly interested in communication. Communication is such an integral part of our lives that it is easy to overlook how complex and pervasive it really is. In sports settings, communication includes everything from conversation between an event manager and a volunteer regarding the logistics of hospitality to the release of new information through social media to the presentation of a live event on television. Conceptualizing something so multidimensional is challenging, but Peterson, Malloch, LaSalle, and Fielding in 2007 offered a helpful a definition. They described sport communication as a process by which people in a sports setting or through a sport endeavor share symbols as they create meaning through interaction. Communication researchers use a variety of approaches in studying their subject matter. Scholars Littlejohn and Foss in 2011 worked to synthesize and organize the various approaches. For instance, some of the approaches categorized by Littlejohn and Foss and other scholars over the years have ranged in focus from the individual, how people learn, why they behave as they do, and the societal, how social systems function, to the critical, how inequality is manifested, and the interpretive, how meaning is discovered. The key point for now is that no single approach for studying communication can adequately address the subject. By recognizing the varied approaches to communication, students can position themselves for better understanding. Just as there are multiple approaches to studying communication, there are many contexts in which communication occurs. Common contexts for communication include interpersonal, group, organizational, and mass-mediated. Interpersonal communication occurs between two people. The ticket taker greets a fan. Group communication takes place among three or more people, such as in a focus group interview. Some communication scholars differentiate between small groups and large groups because the dynamics vary based on the number of people involved. Organizational communication occurs internally via meetings, memos, and externally, news releases, and website. Mass-mediated communication takes place when information is shared with large audiences through print, electronic, or news media channels. Sport communication is a process. The process involves multiple participants, the sharing of symbols in some form or another, and resultant interactions that are meaningful for those involved. In many exchanges, the related dynamics are multiple and varied. For example, a sport organization tweets information about a roster change to its large group of followers. Some will see the tweet, whereas others will not. And some will understand the full context of the message, of the roster announcement. Others may ignore the message altogether. Some will react by liking the tweet. Others may retweet with additional commentary, thus extending the message's reach to others. The process becomes particularly complex in mass communication settings. Although mass media commonly provide timely and accurate information, mistakes sometimes occur. The value of communication models is that they help us understand that process. Most people do so by identifying the elements involved in the process. The following are the most basic components as portrayed in a model developed by Lasswell in 1948. There's a sender, a message, the channel to which the message is delivered, and the receiver. Using this model, the communication source could be a speaker at a community relations event, the author of a new company policy, or the writer of a news release. The message in each of these cases is the denotation and connotation of the spoken or written words and pictures that the sender produces. Although we can describe channels literally, broadcast or cable channels, communication scholars usually use the term to describe the delivery system or the way in which the message gets from the sender to the receiver as a spoken word, gestures, over-the-air broadcast, television, and film. Thus, the channel through which a message is delivered could be face-to-face spoken words with accompanying voice, expression, and gesture cues, or printed word with accompanying graphics and layout. The receiver of the communication could be one person or several people who are listening to a speaker, reading a magazine, or visiting a website. Shannon and Weaver in 1949 created a communication model that added two additional elements, encoding and decoding, to this process. The encoding and decoding components of the communication process refer to the inescapable fact that every sender and receiver of communication assigns meaning to the communicated message. This meaning might or might not be readily apparent. Think about times you have heard or seen something that did not communicate the intended message. Key words might not have been familiar, or the speaker's language might have been communicating one message while her facial expressions communicated another. At a sporting event, communication takes place in various contexts, such as interpersonal interactions between a fan and guest services employee, a group meeting between a sales director and prospective clients in a luxury box, and media members receiving game notes from a media relations intern in the press box. The message in each of these cases is the detonation and connotation of the spoken or written words and pictures that the sender produces. Although we can describe channels literally, broadcast or cable channels, communication scholars usually use the term Schramm expanded on an earlier model by including the element of feedback. The resultant model portrayed communication as a two-way rather than a one-way process. Feedback helps the communicator understand whether the receiver got the correct message. It provides information for future communication. Phone calls about a change in the services offered by a recreation facility, fans erupting in cheers at a spirit rally, or the defeat of a municipal ballot initiative to help fund a team's new sports arena, or are all examples of feedback. Another communication concept, noise, refers to elements that can impede successful communication. It can be literal, such as fans at a sporting event drowning out the public address announcer with their yelling. Noise can also be figurative. A poorly printed brochure would certainly hinder communication effectiveness and thus could be a form of noise. The goal in communicating is to minimize controllable noise and cut through uncontrollable noise so as few impediments as possible are present in the communication process. Schramm also argued that for communication to exist, the sender and the receiver must share something, a common language, vocabulary, or interest in or understanding of the subject being communicated. The more the sender and receiver share, the easier it is for them to communicate effectively. One of the questions that has arisen as communication models have evolved over the years is just how much effect communication has on the parties involved in the interaction. More specifically, a number of theories have addressed the effects of the mass media on audiences. For instance, an early model of unlimited effects theorized that audiences are highly susceptible to the effects of messages conveyed through the mass media. According to the unlimited effects theory, audience members are easily influenced because they are unable to resist the power of media messages. Research, however, did not support this theory. So, Several theories regarding the limited effects of mass media have taken its place. These theories include the following: uses and gratification. According to this theory, audience members self-select which mass media messages to embrace based on their psychological dispositions and needs. They reject messages that they do not find useful or personally gratifying. Agenda setting. As proposed by McCombs and Shaw in 1972, the mass media are not powerful enough to tell people what to think about an issue. But the media do have the power to influence which issues people think about. In other words, the mass media influences the public agenda. Although cueing and priming are popular agenda-setting theories, framing is an agenda-setting theory often used in sport communication. The proposition of framing theory is that, as noted by Abeza and O'Reilly and Nadal in 2014, the media determine issue saliency, but also by selecting themes, phrases, and images of a story. They determine the salience of a specific attribute attached to an issue and thus determine how it is perceived. Innovation. This theory recognizes the mass media may influence audience members by providing information regarding new developments, products, or services. According to the media play a role in the process by which innovations are adopted. Diffusion of information. According to this theory, the mass media can affect large numbers when people who receive a message through the media then share that message with others. Modeling and cultivation. These two theories address the influence of the mass media on various audiences. Modeling theory proposes that children and young adults may be inclined to alter their behavior based on media messages that they consume, following role models, for example. Cultivation theory suggests that media messages influence opinions and attitudes based on the media consumption patterns of audiences. For example, audience members who frequently select violent programs may view the world as being more violent than people who do not as frequently select violent programs. The SSCM, or Strategic Sport Communication Model, provides a framework that shows how the dynamics of communication and the various settings for communication come together in sport. The model depicted in 14.1 that you see here has 4 primary elements. One element is the sport communication process, which is displayed twice to emphasize that the process, elements, and effects described in the previous section pervade all the settings within the field. The other elements are the personal and organizational communication and sport component, the mediated communication and sport component, and the sport communication services and support component. Note that these key elements are related and often overlap. The arrows pointing to and from component 1 denote that the types and forms of communication in the central component influence the forms of communication in components 2 and 3, and vice versa. Component 1 and the SSCM includes the various forms of personal communication and organizational communication in sport. Each is considered in the following paragraphs. Personal communication includes intrapersonal, interpersonal, and a small group communication. The prefix inter means between, so interpersonal communication is the exchange of messages between two people. Intrapersonal communication is so prevalent that it is arguably the most common type of communication. By definition, it is private, but many people choose to share their thoughts via social media, Snapchat, and Twitter, and other internet sites such as personal blogs. Other interpersonal communication in sport is generally kept private. An exception is mediated intrapersonal communication, which is internal communication revealed through some form of media. For example, a sport industry executive typing out a Facebook post that reveals his or her thoughts. Instances of mediated intrapersonal communication abound and are often revealed on social media platforms. The interpersonal communication typically occurs between a couple of individuals in a closed setting and may be verbal or nonverbal, such as using facial cues. Unmediated, which is exchanging information through notes, face-to-face interactions, or mediated, engaging in telephone conversations, email or social media, correspondence, and text messages. Thus, this form of communication incorporates the varied social media that are now an essential part of our communication lives. Mediated interpersonal communication in sport often involves social media interactions, communicating back and forth on a social media platform, and parasocial interactions. According to Abeza and colleagues, parasocial interaction is how media users develop a sense of relationships with media personnel or persona. As viewers continue to view media personalities, they develop bonds of intimacy, which resemble interpersonal social interaction but differ as is mediated. Small group communication occurs in settings of 3 or more people. Although more people are involved, the means for small group communication are identical to those for interpersonal communication. Small group communication is also like interpersonal communication in that the communication has a shared purpose and the people involved influence one another in the process. It is more complex, of course, because more people are involved. The varying degrees to which people in the group engage in communication and the differing ways they respond can make group communication extremely complex. 3 types of personal communication: intrapersonal, interpersonal, and small group may occur in either an intra-organizational or inter-organizational setting. Intra-organizational setting occurs within a sport organization, and inter-organizational communication occurs when members of a sport organization interact with the outside organization. As with personal communication, the intra or inter-organizational communication in sport may be unmediated or mediated. For example, as noted by Peterson and colleagues in 2017, mediated inter-organizational communication involves activities such as a sport organization, like a team, using email or social media to communicate with another entity, such as a sponsorship group. Component 2 of the SSCM includes the traditional sport mass media. In other words, publishing and print communication, such as the sports sections of newspapers, electronic and visual communication, and as sports programming on television, and the emerging social media in sport. This component of the SSCM is the most frequently examined by sport communication scholars. Mediated communication in sport is conducted through myriad of mass media, social media endeavors, ranging from social media interactions by sport teams to fantasy sport apps, and from ESPN's television programs to the print and online sports sections of the USA Today. Thus, convergence in mediated communication over the past decade or so has blurred the lines between the various sport media. For instance, people working in sport print communication positions include professionals such as sports writers, columnists, editors, and photographers who often engaged in a variety of mass media and emerging and social media activities. In a single day, the sport print communication professional could be writing a column for tomorrow's printed newspaper, posting updates on social media platforms, videoing and uploading interviews, talking on the radio, and sitting on a television panel. While convergence has affected the sport media landscape, we create an artificial segmentation of the field to categorize this component of mediated communication in sport into manageable and understandable parts. The 2 main categories, sport mass media and emerging and social media, are addressed in the following sections. The first category of mediated communication in sport includes what most would view as the traditional mass media platforms, such as the print media, published materials such as sports magazines, books, and newspapers, and the electronic or visual media, broadcast, cable, and satellite sport television, sport radio, sport films and movies, and sport photography. The second category of mediated communication in sport includes a variety of communication platforms, most of which are internet-based. They range from traditional sport-related websites to social networking platforms, such as Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, to sport blogs and sport e-commerce systems. As of 2017, More than 3.6 billion people worldwide were using the internet. Many of these users go online to access sport information. Sport websites such as ESPN.com, CBSSports.com, Fox Sports, Sports Yahoo, NBCSports.com, SI.com, SportingNews.com, and NFL.com frequently draw heavy traffic. Internet usage growth in recent years has been significant. The percentage of the North American population using the internet was over 89% in 2017. The emergence of new media has already had a profound effect on how many sport communication professionals practice their profession, and it seems certain that more changes are on the way. One advantage that many sport organizations have already realized through the internet is the ability to reach a mass audience quickly and inexpensively without having to go through the mass media. In addition, the internet provides a forum for a two-way flow of communication with the public. Sports social media in particular have become powerful platforms for sport organizations and publics to interact. Members of the public share information, experiences, and opinions through traditional social media where content may reside for the long term, such as Facebook, and sport ephemeral social media in which content is automatically deleted after a designated amount of time, such as Snapchat. When they do so, sport organizations can assess the environment and, when appropriate, engage people in dialogue and shared experiences. Overall, as noted by Peterson and colleagues, digital, mobile, and social media are increasing in both their pervasiveness and their importance to sport and media organizations and sport stakeholders, such as bloggers, columnists, consumers, executives, fans, and entrepreneurs. Broadcast media outlets are prevalent throughout much of the world. In this table, it displays the number of TV and radio stations broadcasting in several countries. Some TV and radio stations are non-commercial or educational, but most are commercial. TV stations may either be affiliated with a broadcast network such as ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, or CW, or operate as independent stations with limited or no network affiliation. Many major network affiliates have local news and thus sport programming. Many broadcast and TV networks have additional sport personnel to cover events on a regular or special basis, such as the NFL season, the Wimbledon championships. Cable sport networks, such as ESPN and its sister channels in particular, require a large number of sport reporters and anchors to handle their all-sport format. Some programs that air on ESPN, however, are sold to the network as a package complete with announcers and commentators under contract to the company that produces the programs, not the network airing them. Component number 3 of the SSCM includes the elements of integrated marketing communication, public relations, and crisis communication and research. Research, which serves as the foundation of successful integrated marketing communication and public relations effort, is addressed in Chapter 21. So we'll focus here on public relations, and sport public relations has been defined as a managerial communication-based function. The first model is a one-way publicity and press agentry model. Organizations that use this model do not seek input from their key publics. They are simply concerned with pushing out messages that reach a wide audience. Grunig and Hunt suggested that the entertainment industry commonly employs this limited one-way model. One could argue that sport falls into that category much of the time. In such cases, feedback is limited to response, such as ticket sales. The second one-way model is the public information model. Organizations that use this model offer useful services to members of the mass media and the public by providing information in a credible manner. For example, they might assist members of the mass media in setting up interviews, or they might provide a variety of other services such as work areas and dedicated wireless access to members of the media who are covering a sporting event. Many professional organizations and college athletic programs have media relations or athletic communications offices to perform these functions. By offering such services, they hope to receive greater amounts of favorable publicity. Two-way communication models are based on the assumption that the most effective forms of communication require input from target publics. In other words, communication requires give and take. The mass media devote considerable attention to sport. Because of that interest, most sport managers find that working with members of the mass media is an important part of their jobs. In many cases, sport organizations hire people to manage media relations. These media relations professionals, or sport information professionals, as they are sometimes called, typically operate in a manner consistent with the public information model. Sport media relations specialists who work for a team, facility, or organization are responsible for creating, coordinating, and organizing information about that entity and disseminating it to the public indirectly through the mass media or through direct channels, i.e. the organizational website. This chapter's profile of Carrie Potts describes the background and work of one such professional. Media relations professionals function as storytellers, writers, videographers, publicists, and crisis communicators. And the following sections elaborate on a few of these evolving duties. The goal of a news release is to disseminate information to targeted publics in the most public light possible. The media usually determine what is and not newsworthy. The job of a media relations professional is to get information in the hands of the media and persuade them to use it because it's newsworthy to some segment of the media's audience. The goal of a news conference, like a news release, is to disseminate noteworthy information from an organization to its targeted publics. News conferences allow face-to-face interaction with members of the media as an organizational spokesperson offers information or makes a statement. After the spokesperson finishes the statement, reporters can usually ask questions. Key considerations for media relations professionals concerning a news conference include who will speak on behalf of the organization and where the news conference will be held. The primary purpose of a press box or area is to provide accredited working members of the media with a place to sit and record the actions of the event. The location of this space varies from sport to sport, but the media traditionally have unobstructed space views of the competition. Separate booths of space or spaces are generally provided for broadcast media, including TV broadcasters, the home organization's radio broadcasters, and the visiting organization's radio team. Sport organizations usually provide results, statistics, and other publicity information to media working in the press area. Competition for jobs in sports media relations is intense. Salaries are not always commensurate with similar communication positions in the corporate world because many people seem willing to work in sport for less money. In addition, sport media relations professionals are frequently called on to work long hours. Because being the first to arrive and the last to leave is common in the profession, work schedules of 60 to 80 hours per week are not uncommon during a season. For those working at the collegiate level, sports seasons usually run about 10 months. Community relations activities tend to center on promoting charitable events and developing opportunities for face-to-face contact with stakeholders. As such, they complement media relations. Sport organizations' activities for many reasons include demonstrating social responsibility and generating long-term goodwill in the community and producing new revenue. Sport community relations professionals who work for a team, a facility or organization are responsible for creating, organizing, and executing charitable initiatives and other programs designed to involve the sport entity in community enhancement. A common form of sport community relations activity is the donation of resources to various charities. Some sport organizations, particularly those at the major professional level, execute a variety of fundraising events throughout the year and then donate the proceeds to charitable organizations. Other sport organizations may simply contribute autographed merchandise that the charity can then auction to support its own fundraising activities. A second form of community relations activities that sport organizations commonly employ involves initiatives to better the community through volunteering. For example, some organizations cultivate youth sport participation by constructing sport venues such as ball fields and sponsoring clinics. Others might establish partnerships with charitable organizations to advocate important messages, stay in school, or generate an important service such as building a home with Habitat for Humanity. These initiatives take place at multiple levels, from the professional sport league to the member franchise to the individual player or coach. In addition, some sport organizations are looking to take their community relations efforts to a new level of effectiveness by creating strategic partnerships to serve their communities more effectively. A third form of common community relations activity does not directly benefit charitable organizations, but does enable the sport organization to build relationships with various constituents. Many community relations professionals coordinate public appearances by other members of their organizations. Still, others organize promotional events, such as the annual winter caravans that many MLB teams stage to rally support during the off-season. Many sport organizations employ public relations professionals in positions that extend beyond media relations or community relations. The following are some of the common positions, such as corporate communications. And this position, tasks may include marketing communications, such as media placement and support of promotional effort, employee communications, community relations, investor relations, and customer relations. Corporate communications positions tend to be more common in sport organizations with relatively large public relations staff. Employee and volunteer relations. These professionals build strong internal relations by creating forums for communication and staging special events, such as a Volunteer Appreciation Day. Volunteer relations positions are more prevalent in settings such as at state amateur sport festivals, in which a large volunteer workforce is critical to successful execution of the event. And digital media manager. Work in this position focuses on organizational websites and social media, through which organizations can share their story, interact with members of key publics, and build important relationships. Depending on the setting, other public relations jobs in the sport industry may focus on donor relations, government relations, and relations with other various governing bodies. Here are a few questions that could be on the test. Why is communication a critical concern to all sport managers, whether they are communication specialists or not? And what are the primary components of the SSCM? What kind of career opportunities does the model encompass? And how has social media changed the way people relate to sport? And what are the ramifications of these changes for sport communicators? So in summary, communication is a core skill required of all sport managers, and it presents an exciting array of career options for prospective professionals. As noted earlier in the chapter, sport communication is defined as a process in which people share symbols in and through sport endeavors and settings and create meaning through their actions. The strategic sport communication model depicts both the dynamic sport communication process and the various settings in which sport communication occurs. The components of the SSC model include personal and organizational communication, sport media and sport communication services and support. Personal communication may occur on an intrapersonal level, interpersonal, or small group basis. It includes both intra-organizational communication within the organization and inter-organization, which is between organizational objectives and representatives and external constituents. The many forms of sport media range from print to electronic to new media. The print media includes sports sections in newspaper and sport magazines and books. Electronic media encompasses sport on television, radio, and in the movies. New media includes sport on the internet and as communicated through other relatively recent technological innovations. The internet is particularly powerful because it provides opportunities to reach constituents directly, instantaneously, and interactively. Social media are a particularly powerful form of engagement. Sport communication services and support include advertising and public relations. The latter topic received considerable attention in the chapter. Sport media relations professionals disseminate information to the public through mass media or other organizational websites. They also manage additional media requests, service the media during games or events, and manage records and statistics. Sport community relations professionals generate goodwill for their organizations. They coordinate organizational participation in charitable endeavors, fundraisers that benefit various nonprofits, and public appearances by managers and players. By carefully executing these activities, they enhance their communities and reputations of their organizations within their communities. A variety of ethical issues are associated with sport communication. These range from protecting people's privacy to allowing for give and take in communication with key publics. Strong critical thinking skills are also important for sport communicators because they face a rapidly evolving communication environment. New technologies accompanied by more frequent demand for bottom line results from communication programs mean that future professionals will be required to process significant amounts of information, apply appropriate value judgments, and define prudent actions. And that is all we have for today, guys. I look forward to talking with you again. Have a great day.